Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison, and I want to welcome you to day 411 of Humanity Rising. Today is the fifth and final day of our week-long program we've called Endangered, that has been convened by Tom Eddington, who's the founder of Endangered Global, and George Caponelli, who's the founder and chief executive of Age Nation. And we've been contemplating this week how fragile life on Earth has become. I'd like to start just with a moment here, a photograph that came from 16,000 feet in southern Chile yesterday, just so as we think about what it means to be endangered, we do so not in the framework of even our planet. This is a shot at dawn yesterday from southern Chile showing the Milky Way. So just take that in for a moment. That's the Milky Way at dawn yesterday. Right in the center here are the constellations Scorpio and Sagittarius. And you see this little dot down there? That's the planet Venus. And somewhere in here, I don't know why this is appearing, somewhere in here is planet Earth. Let us take in both the grandeur of the Milky Way, which is one galaxy of countless billions of galaxies. They say there are many galaxies out there, as there are sands of all the oceans and seashores of our Earth. And our planet is a tiny little speck in a minor galaxy, which is part of a super galaxy in an expanding universe, which, as Plotinus said, all breathes together. So as we convene our final day today, everyone, let us contemplate the vastness of being. Let us center ourselves for a moment in our bodies, composed of stardust. All planets are stardust. Let's find our way to our heart. Let us attune ourselves to our beating heart. But let us gaze for just a minute through our hearts on the galaxy. Thank you, everyone. I believe it was Homer in the Iliad that said all human action is but an echo against the vastness of eternity. I want to now welcome Tom and George back to Humanity Rising. Thank you both so much for putting this program together. It's a delight to be now in our fifth and final session for this conversation with one of the great spirits of our time, Vandana Shiva. And I turn the program over to you.
Thank you, Jim. Thanks for your incredible vision and putting Humanity Rising, giving birth to that, and giving us all an opportunity to speak to people around the globe who want and need more vital truth. What is that expression you have about truth? Truth
Pursued, not truth possessed.
Yes, yes. So for those of you who are joining us for the first time this week, I just want you to know you've missed an incredible week, and we'll give you the opportunity to watch many of the programs in replay and really heartily encourage you to do it. During today's session, Tom and I, after we have the privilege of being in dialogue with our wonderful guest today, we'll give you some recaps and give you a chance to explore some of that and talk about next steps. It really is. It's been a pleasure to be with you. And we hope that you'll continue watching all of these remarkable programs that 411 days worth that really helped inspire and give us all hope about what's possible with humanity. Tom, do you want to introduce our guest?
Sure. Thank you, Jim, for sharing the image of the Milky Way, and I couldn't help but look at the image and reflect on a comment made by Dr. Sylvia Earle on Tuesday when she was with us, when she said, "Earth is a spacecraft in an unfriendly universe." And I was looking at that image and the beauty and the extraordinary emotions I was feeling looking at it while holding that contrasting comment that she made about Earth being a spacecraft in an unfriendly universe. And, you know, my dualistic way of thinking was feeling the tension between the two of those. And the beauty and the reality is that our spacecraft could be hit by a meteor, could be hit by an asteroid, could be hit by something out there in the universe that could be perceived as unfriendly. So thank you for the image, Jim, and thank you, George, for the opportunity to collaborate this week. We've had an extraordinary group of panelists, and I'm just so delighted to have you with us this week, Vandana.
Thank you.
I feel a bit embarrassed in even trying to attempt to introduce you with all of the accomplishments, all of the things you've done. You've had an extraordinary life and the contributions you've made to humanity. And we could just focus on seed banking, or we could focus on organic farming, or the movements in India to prevent GMO, the chemical industry in the impact it's had on destroying topsoil and fertilizer, et cetera, and your work around spirituality. I mean, the list goes on and on and on, and you're such an inspiration for me personally and for the world in the things you've chosen to take on. And if I were to have a regret, it would be that there's only one of you.
We are many together, yeah.
And I'm absolutely delighted with the synchronicity and the timing that you're with us today with the release of your newest book on philanthrocapitalism. And we look forward to exploring that with you today in our dialogue. So I suspect most of the, if not all of the people who are joining us today know of your accomplishments. And so I would just say welcome and thank you again for being with us today.
Thank you, Tom. I'm glad I was able to join on this very, very important dialogue. I think, the whole issue of the threat of extinction, multiple levels, is, if you were to ask me, actually the root cause for even climate chaos.
Yeah, as I shared earlier in the week, the way I hold what's happening in the state of the world is climate change is one side of the coin and biodiversity is the other, and biodiversity loss. And humanity has been arrogantly, willy-nilly flipping that coin. And as Dr. Earl reminded us earlier this week, up until recently, we thought that planet Earth was too big to fail. And what we are now coming to realize is that, in fact, like we saw with some of the large financial institutions back in 2008, they were not too big to fail. And we're learning that planet Earth is not too big to fail. And some of the knowledge that we've learned through the wisdom traditions, and thank goodness that science is catching up with the wisdom traditions, there are about 850 ecosystems on planet Earth. And if we can allow nature to have half of each of those ecosystems, we can stop the sixth mass extinction that we're currently experiencing by the end of this decade. But it means living in harmony with nature and allowing nature to have at least half of each of those ecosystems.
Tom, the only thing I'd like to add to that is that I think the only thing that's too big and that is destined to fail is the ego of humanity, that has brought us to this brink. But I'm interested to have the opportunity to listen to you, Vandana. I haven't been with you in this way previously, and I've heard nothing but extraordinary things about you. So tell us where you are at the moment in regard to your sense of hope or pessimism for the plight we are in.
Well, I'm when I look at the destructiveness of big power, those who think they are too big to fail. If one thought that power is absolute, one would be a pessimist. But I think that beautiful image that Jim started with, that, our planet is a speck in that beautiful universe. And we are a speck on this beautiful planet. And I feel very blessed that, growing up in India, I've both grown up in a civilization that has celebrated the small as the place for creativity. Gandhi pulled out, what did he pull out against the colonial empire of cotton and the British Empire that occupied 85% of the territories of this earth? And those horrible satanic mills. He pulled out a spinning wheel. And so when I heard, the giant Monsanto and the other chemical giants talk about how now they wanted to own the seed, and they really thought they were too big to fail. I took inspiration from Gandhi's spinning wheel, and I said, well, then today's spinning wheel is the seed, because the empires are now empires over life. And the power of the small actually is where I get hope, because the small is what life is made of, beginning from the molecule to the cell to the whole system. And this idea that we are, our Earth is a spacecraft on an unfriendly universe. I don't think it is ecologically correct, nor is it spiritually the right way to approach our situation. It's not ecologically correct because I don't think we're a spacecraft. The Earth is a living organism. She's Gaia. And all cultures of the world, before colonialism and industrialism, recognize the Earth as Mother Earth. So part of what's endangered is that cosmology, which it's not extinct. And I want to pay a tribute today to all the amazing people, who were pushed and pushed and pushed to a corner, the indigenous people. And the two things that we need to take inspiration and hope from them. First is that even though they've been marginalized, their lands have been grabbed, in the 20-25% lands they hold, they're conserving 80% of the biodiversity of this planet. So, Tom, I would say we don't need to say half for nature. We need to say all of the planet lived with harmoniously like the indigenous people do. And then it shifts, because then we realize we get everything from the earth. We get our breath from the earth. We get our food from the earth. We get our water from the earth. We get our life from the earth. The earth is alive, and we're alive because the earth is alive. And then it shifts to saying, and therefore, how do I live every day? How does each of us live every day? Reducing our ecological footprint, living a better life, and learning from those who were called backward. I think if we can just make one shift, redefine primitiveness, and reclaim Terra Madre, reclaim the living earth, we've made a huge shift. And my little bit of work with a small seed, with saving biodiversity on our farms, has shown that the first thing we have to do is get the pressure off the earth. That's the first thing we have to do. Yeah. Stop causing harm. That's our first step. The second step is realize that she has the power, and to work with that power. That to me is ecological action. That to me is earth care. And then amazing things happen. And I think a lot of people, I notice I'm a bit surprised that, people talk of trauma, climate trauma. And I always think, if you're in an interconnected universe, and in a living universe and a conscious universe, then you can't have trauma, because you have to realize where we went into disharmony. And I would not say humanity's ego, because as I said, the indigenous people carry the ecocentric worldview. Women carry the life and consciousness that the earth is alive and they're alive. They are not dead bodies, inert bodies, and the earth is not an inert body. So we are, I think at one level, the severe crisis we are living through is also an opportunity to stop treating as inevitable structures that are very recent history. Colonialism, just 500 years old. The fossil fuel empires, only 200 years mistake in a 4 billion year history of this planet. Yeah, just put it into proportion. It's a little blip. And how, if we learn from the earth how she organizes herself, then all the actions fall right into place. And the ego is there. And that's what my book, Philanthropic Capitalism, is about, the big egos.
What a wonderful thing to remind us of, the relative insignificance in history of the causative factors that are challenging us, and the incredible length and depth and scope of the wisdom traditions that have allowed us to even be alive today. Could you talk to us a little bit about what's going on with farmers in India and some of the challenges that they're facing?
Well, I think the wonderful spirit of the protest that lasted 14 months in India were really a refusal of Indian farmers, who are small farmers, to be endangered. They said, we will not disappear. The protest was against laws of deregulation that would destroy the small farms of India, like they've destroyed the small farms and family farms of the United States and Canada and Europe and everywhere across the world. And let me just touch then on my new book, which builds on my book Oneness versus 1%, which came out about 3 years ago. But I wrote that with my son. But this new book on philanthrocapitalism is really co-authored with the leading movements that are looking at different aspects of where the ego of limitless money and limitless power is trying to take us, and the movements that are saying, no, we will not be endangered. So just when the COVID was bursting, Mr. Gates came out with Gates Ag one agriculture for the whole world. We are now, all the Tom talked about the ecosystems in the world. We used to eat 10,000 species of crops and plants, and we've been reduced to about 10 to 12. And now he wants one agriculture. And his slogan is farming without farmers, though he'll be the largest farm landowner, and food without farms. Yeah. So let me just briefly mention how the Philanthrocapitalism book is connected to the theme of these 5 days of endangered. What is it endangering? It is endangering democracy. The subtitle of the book is Philanthrocapitalism and the Erosion of Democracy, and has been published by Synergetic Press. It is endangering small farmers. It's endangering biodiversity. One agriculture for the whole world. I mean, it's bad enough you have one agriculture in the Midwest of America, which is a green desert. Punjab was destroyed with one agriculture of rice and wheat monocultures, and that's why the palm farmers are rising. It's an endangerment of food. You had a discussion on how a bad food system, fossil fuel and chemical-based and globalized food system, is responsible for so much destruction. It's 50% of the greenhouse gases, and it's about 90% of the biodiversity erosion and disappearance, and the soil erosion, and the water erosion, and the diseases. So this idea of food without farms means farming, the one agriculture, will become raw material supplier, and then food will only come from labs and artificially made. But when we know that food is what runs the universe, the currency of life is food, then we are talking about more ecological destruction, more energy use, more chemical pollution, more toxics driving species out, and definitely more climate change. But if you then think of how we relate to a living earth, the living earth is a community of living organisms. That's biodiversity. Biodiversity weaves the web of life. And part of what Gates created and is financing in a big way is the new generation of GMOs based on gene editing. He doesn't understand that the earth is amazing self-organization at work. He thinks the whole world is a word program. Cut and paste, cut and paste. That's not how living systems work. One cut leads to 1,500 in unpredictable changes. And every day more and more research is showing this. But here's a whole field that should never have been created. He financed the research. He basically facilitates the patents, editors at the company. But then you push gene editing one step further. And I think those who care about biodiversity should be looking at this much more carefully. He basically has worked with the defense research, with DARPA, the Agency on Defense, on gene drives. Now that's gene editing taken to the ultimate push to deliberately push species to extinction, gene drives. This has been big issue in the Biodiversity Convention. And then if we are troubled about climate change, surely the best thing we have to do is stop doing the things that harm the Earth's self-organizing capacity and, get the climate, get the fossil fuels out and get the heavy resource use out and work with the biosphere, work with the biodiversity. The second element where this, idea of I am the master, the manipulator of the world, just like gene drives are intending to push species to extinction, geoengineering is another of Mr. Gates' favorite pastimes of engineering the climate by putting pollutants in the sky, aerosols in the sky, to create clouds, to block the sun. And I said, coming back to the beautiful image of the Milky Way and the universe, and of which we are a part. Can you imagine trying to block the sun? That means you want to block life, because the sun's energy is what makes life work on this planet. And so I hope, the people will look at that, because it's so connected. And there's not a sphere, education, health, agriculture, food, climate, biodiversity. And the beauty of that book is the movements leading the different campaigns have written on the basis of their 20, 30, 40 years of work. And I do hope, like Monsanto thought it was too big to fail and it's gone, it's now Bayer. And I hope within the next few years, I hope we don't have to carry on to the 500th discussion, but I do hope this level of irresponsible use of money that was made through deregulation to then further destroy the planet and have absolutely no democratic regulation left, that is not just a threat to democracy, it is a threat to our ecological future. It is a recipe for endangerment across species.
Just picking up on a couple of the points you made, and thank you for what you just shared. I wanted to share that on Wednesday, one of our panelists was John Leary from Trees for the Future. And they're an organization that has been working primarily in Africa, but not exclusively, to alleviate poverty and hunger through small farming and planting trees. And they've come up with, and over the last 30 years, an agroforestry model that helps with women's empowerment. It helps with food security. It helps with hunger alleviation and a number of other practices. And they've got 40,000 small farmers now in Africa, and they're looking to grow that to 250,000. So they're coming up with a solution for the African continent. Certainly we need to replicate that in other parts of the world. And one of the concerns I have, and one of the things I'd like to talk about, picking up on your comment, was where are the checks and balances? Where are the governance systems that enable something like what Trees for the Future has been doing in Africa to bring that to other parts of the world? And maybe you can talk a bit more about what's been happening in India and some of your work there, to prevent some of these technocratic ways of thinking about agriculture and biodiversity, and thinking technology is the solution rather than allowing nature and Mother Earth to inform and guide us.
So basically, most agriculture of the world, or most food systems of the world, were perennial. Yeah. It's only with chemicals that the focus came on annual crops, because that's the only way you keep selling fertilizer every year, I mean, if you harvest food from the forests, and we are working with a lot of communities where we are again diversifying the food base. Not, part of what the movement Navdanya has done is bring back the diversity of seed, but also intensify the biodiversity of cultivation. And our work is showing we can feed 2 times the population by conserving biodiversity, and totally flips the false assumption that to feed the humans, you've got to destroy other species. Absolutely wrong. Got to protect other species to have more food. And I think now after my 40 years of working on this, there is enough evidence, and it's coming from all over the world. Indigenous people, 90% of their diet was tree-based. Yeah. And then in the middle, they'd have a few shifting cultivation, never destroying the forest. And that we became blind to it. So the Green Revolution, about which we have a whole chapter also in our book, Philanthrocapitalism, because the Green Revolution destroyed Punjab, but then it is going to destroy Africa. When it was brought to Punjab, the first thing that was done, the trees were cut. Because once you give primacy to machines and chemicals, then biodiversity comes in the way. Hedgerows have to be chopped down. Field trees and farm trees have to be chopped down. So wherever, if you travel over India, wherever the Green Revolution hasn't come, it's dense with trees. And we are in fact doing a biodiversity mapping this year of ecological farms and their biodiversity density, not just of crops, but trees and crops and animals. And wherever there is the Green Revolution and chemicals, flat, no trees, monocultures. And a lot of the technological miracles being offered in this GATE-SAG-1 kind of idea is now we'll have surveillance drones to spray the Roundup. And we will have surveillance drones to be able to spray more efficiently. Yeah. No, you need care. Yeah. You need care for Mother Earth. You don't need surveillance drones to have more efficient spraying of Roundup. We don't need Roundup in agriculture. Roundup, as in the negotiations of the Biodiversity Convention, I remember the Monsanto person got up and said, this kills everything green and it prevents the weeds from stealing the sunshine. I said, you have a sad worldview, that the sunshine is so generous it can't be stolen. And what you call weeds are our biodiversity. We eat it, it's medicinal plants, it's fodder for our animals. So we have to basically shift what I took from monoculture of the mind to biodiversity of the mind. And how do we spread it, as you asked? Number one, the Green Revolution model of monocultures, the industrial model of monocultures, and the exclusive, you can either have forests or you can have farms, got to get rid of that idea. Forests have to become sources of food. Farms have to become forests, as they were in all our cultures. Yeah, our forests were farms, and our farms were forests. So these divisions, including the division of wild, wild is defined in Western dictionary as where humans are not. But if you look at 80% biodiversity where the indigenous people are, then wild is where humans care and live with other species in peace and harmony and flourishing. So wild has to be redefined as self-organized freedom and harmony from absence of humans. Presence of humans is what makes the wild wild. And I would apply that to our gut. I would apply that to our mind. I think we need more wild minds, rather than this totally manipulated, first by mechanical thinking, and now by, oh my God, what do you call it? It used to be called false news, but you can't even call it fake news anymore. It's gone so far beyond. I don't even know what to call it. Legalized disinformation. And the disinformers are the ones who control what should be called disinformation. And they run the platforms and they decide who'll be able to allow to use their platform and who'll be shut out. It's a strange moment, but then you again come back, to that same idea of the smallness of our moment of history. Well, they did that to the learned women in the 15th century. Let's not forget the papal bull. Let's not forget the witch's hammer. Anyone who thinks differently must be burnt on a stake. We've been there before. We allowed freedom of knowledge to flourish again. And we must learn from history to not repeat the mistakes. And we must learn from all cultures to get it right. And thank goodness there are living cultures that are there to teach us.
Vandana, you are such a breath of fresh air. Honestly, I mean, as you were talking before about our good friend Gates, I was thinking that maybe we should remind him of Icarus, and hope that he'll fly too close to the sun when he tries to build his clouds and cover the earth, you know. I'm aware as you're speaking of how so much of the world, other than the United States, so much of the world remains closer to the wisdom traditions in some ways, certainly, than America does. What advice do you have for us? How do we work with this insanity that seems to have taken possession of our culture, and that seems to have such a rigid control over what we do? How do we help people to remember the wisdom traditions and to have some of the intelligence that is shown in Europe and in India and other places when it comes to biodiversity?
You know, I think it's very present in North America. It's just that we have to look towards the first people. Yeah. Yes. And every day they're speaking, every day they're saying things. And I think the indigenous people who suffered the worst genocide are the North Americans. 90% of their populations were wiped out, but they continue to hold in deeper and deeper ways the wisdom tradition. So many places I have visited communities where they're bringing back their agricultural practices. I remember in Winnipeg, there was a human rights museum, and I had been invited to do the inauguration. And the indigenous people called me for a feast. You know, it was their sacred land that had been grabbed to make this museum, of course. But they gave me in the middle of winter, and they must have cooked about, I think, 50 kinds of plants. And here we are, we don't even imagine, you know, the diversity in their diet. Because not only did we forget the three sisters, you know, now it's GMO corn, GMO corn, GMO corn, but corn never worked in lonely ways. Corn always worked in partnership with the bean and the squash. But that wasn't all. It wasn't just the cultivated plots. The forests was an abundant sources. So I think we need to link biodiversity back into our thinking. We need to link biodiversity back into our food system. And we definitely need to link biodiversity to human rights, if you were to ask me. Because the violation of cultural diversity and the violation of biodiversity go together. You know, cultural diversity and biodiversity go like this. And at this point of our, you know, if endangered, the dialogue is doing anything, it's basically saying, we've pushed so much to endangerment, so much to extinction, 200 species a day, 1,000 times, 10,000 times faster rate of disappearance. But we are a threatened species. Yeah, we as human species could find an end to our existence on this planet if we don't take care of the planet and how the planet creates the infrastructure of our life. We are so busy building infrastructures. And infrastructure should be described. What is it an infrastructure for? You know, is it an infrastructure for mobility? Is it an infrastructure for energy generation? But these words that don't have a complete sentence, I think part of the confusion. So I think we need to start, you know, this, I don't like the phrase build back better, because it's again anthropocentric, you know, it's human beings who will build rather than we will serve the earth and we will co-create in humbler ways. That is the shift that is happening. It's just that the systems that have destroyed so much, I watch from a distance, or even in my own country, so much IT power, so much social media power, manufacturing hate and divide and rule. You know, on a scale that we've never seen before. So I think our immunity right now has to be not just immunity to disease and pandemics, it has to be mental and spiritual immunity and resilience, and most importantly, immunity to the pollution of the mind.
Are you interested in running for president of the United States or any of that? No, huh? We can't
No, I
convince,
get
we can't convince you.
service
Huh?
of the earth. I think the reason I've been able to take the journey I have is I did not just not get attracted by power and dominating power. I actually find it quite abhorrent. I think service is a better choice.
Yeah. Well, you certainly demonstrate that. So where in this, on this path of juggling between a return to an honoring of the indigenous and the wisdom traditions and this abhorrent mechanism that we've created, where are we? And are we capable, in your opinion, of stopping the spread of the disease so that the earth can in fact cure itself?
Oh, I'm 100% confident of that, that we are the contaminants in the kind of modes of economy, production, etc., that we've adopted. But we can change, and that's the important thing. It's in our power to change. When I started working on ecological agriculture, everyone used to laugh at me, saying, you can't turn the green revolution around. It just has to become more chemical intensive. You can't change this. You can't ever stop the Monsantos and their patents and GMOs. And I think a deep commitment and a deep solidarity generates the power to change. But the difference between what we are being called on to do for the earth and what we are called on to do for those in our human community who have been more deprived and more disenfranchised is that the earth's power is the real power on this planet. It's just that the Cartesian idea, the Baconian idea of mastery, empire over man, of man over lesser creatures, all of that ideology of separation and superiority and anthropocentrism that we as a species have a privileged status, I think that is the baggage that's coming. But it's also being shed. I mean, I watch people send me books, from America. What do they send me? Someone sent me a book on trees. Another sent me braiding sweetgrass. Here are other books that are becoming popular. People are waking up that the earth is alive. I think if we can make one shift in our minds, the earth is not dead as for 200-300 years we were told, the earth is alive. Then what does the earth call on me to do? What are her instructions? And who are the best carriers of those instructions? That's the wisdom traditions. They give us a shortcut, in order to not have to spend as long to figure out what the earth wants us to do. So I have, the reason I have deep hope is I trust the earth. I put my trust in the earth and I work very hard. I do put a lot of effort at preventing those who harm to continue to harm without any restriction. I mean, why do I write books like Philanthrocapitalism? Because I do think Gates should not be seen as a savior of the world. He should be recognized for the harm he is causing.
You do give me hope, and I'm sure that you are giving listeners around the world hope. And I think we also, as you say, and as the earth is demonstrating, if it does nothing else, it's going to shake those of us who are opposed to its wisdom off its face if we don't listen in some other way. I know I personally hoped that from the pandemic would come a resurgence of awakening and understanding. And in many ways, that has come for a number of people. But here, at least in the US, I can feel that pace, that insane pursuit of what is not part of the wisdom traditions beginning to pick up again. You know, everybody's so anxious to get 5G this and 7.2 this and whatever it happens to be. And we need you. I hope you're coming here more. I hope Tango and Johnny will make sure that you spend a lot more time here.
Well, all that depends, you know, not only did we have a virus, now we might even have a war. So let's just hope for the best, work for peace, work for love, work for compassion and joy. And I will have to be leaving you now, but thank you for having me join you for these sessions on endangered, and a will to refuse to be wiped out by giving love. You know, I think that is it. The antidote to extinction is a commitment to life and love.
You're a blessing. Tom?
Thank you, George. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you for being with us.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. So, Tom, what a wonderful way to put a punctuation on parts of this week. Talk about an authentic, original human spirit, you know? She reminds us of the depth of the feminine, the power of the masculine side of the feminine, and some paths that we really should be paying such a lot of attention to going forward, you know? Jim, good to see your face.
Very good to see the both of you. And just to acknowledge Vandana, you know, I think you're right, George. We need someone like that to run for high office in this country. And when you really appreciate the grandeur of someone like Vandana Shiva, you know, a physicist, a scientist, an activist, a mystic, a passionate lover of the earth, common sense wisdom, you get a measure of the pygmies that are governing our countries, and not just the United States. But I don't think I can't think readily of a country anywhere in the world that has the quality of leadership, certainly that someone like Vandana Shiva exemplifies, or that is so comprehensively well-informed and so courageous about her willingness to put herself on the front lines, you know, speaking truth to power, but then also seizing power. And, you know, she was almost single-handedly responsible for keeping Monsanto out of India. And while we in the United States were feeling overwhelmed and there's nothing we can do and Vandana Shiva took him on and beat him, because when she showed up in court, she knew more than any of the Monsanto lawyers, and the judge and the government officials knew that. And so we have, you know, she's been called the Gandhi of our time. You know, the Gandhi of food, actually, in India, for the work that she's done to preserve the purity of food. And, you know, she's been so anguished with what's been going on around food in India. Over 400,000 farmers in India have committed suicide because they can no longer cope with the pressures and the debt and the climate change and the manipulations of the government and so forth and so on. And she's right there with them, empowering them every step of the way. And so I think she was a beautiful closing for this week. And the fact that today is the launch of her new book, Capitalism, was a beautiful synchronicity and was quintessential Vandana Shiva taking on Bill Gates. I mean,
Well, if she can take on Monsanto, Gates ought to be a walk in the park. But what she needs is our support, and we need
Yeah.
her wisdom and all the wisdom that's been explored and expressed this week. Tom and I thought it would be fitting after Vandana to review some of the other wisdom that has been expressed over the course of these days. When we think of the bright lights and hearts that just have been willing over these 5 days. And I want viewers to know this is not the end of the endangered proposition. We're going to do other programs with Jim's kind collaboration and support. These are topics we need to keep in the forefront. Tom, what were some of the highlights for you during these last several days?
Yeah, and I'd like to start with today before going back to earlier in the week, and start with the image once again that Jim shared of the Milky Way and the beauty of that image. And for me, it was just another reminder, and I love being reminded on a daily basis, that beauty is the fabric of the universe.
Mm.
And looking at that image, and we've seen images from the Hubble telescope that just are beautiful reminders that beauty is the fabric of the universe. And as Vandana shared with us this morning, love is the energy of the universe. And if we can tap into love, and as Father Joshram Karithadam shared with us yesterday, that community is the answer. It is the solution to what we're facing. And as Charles reminded us yesterday, when we don't know the answers, to linger in the problem, to linger until we fully comprehend and we fully understand what we're facing, and not making the mistake of having unintended consequences. But if we can linger in that love that Vandana was sharing with us today, if we can linger and allow ourselves to be still for a moment until we have a better sense of what we're doing. And I absolutely loved what was shared this morning, that just that sense that the role that Earth plays in our daily lives, that Earth is in charge, and that if we can accept and recognize and celebrate and appreciate that Earth is alive, that it's not just some rock sitting there in the Milky Way and in outer space, but it's a living being. And shifting our relationship, and that we have this responsibility, we have this ability to be the stewards of this incredible living being, planet Earth, and assume that responsibility and be informed by it, that we're not in control, we're not in charge, as we've been living in that egotistical way for the last several hundred years. So it's been an extraordinary week, and the gifts that we've been given of the panelists and some of the things they've shared with us has been beautiful. And I really appreciated Lynn Twist's comment yesterday that worry is a form of negative prayer.
Yeah.
And if we can allow ourselves to let go of the worry and to embrace community, to embrace love, to allow Mother Earth to let us be guided by the wisdom, the knowledge of Mother Earth, of nature, of biodiversity, of our wisdom traditions and the indigenous peoples who have been showing us the way for thousands of years. So I'll stop there for a moment and have you jump in, George, but those are some of the things that are coming up for me in this moment.
They're wonderful things. I'm reminded when you bring up Charles Eisenstein's contribution, or one of them yesterday. There's a quote, I think it was by I.F. Stone, who said, if you're getting answers, you're not asking big enough questions, you know? And I think that one of the reasons that I am so grateful for what Humanity Rising is doing is that I think it can help give the world the opportunity to ask bigger questions and to bring people like Vandana and all of the guests this week and many of the guests that have been on over this past 400 plus days, the opportunity to ask some of those questions and to remind us that there are paths to answers. I was touched especially this morning when she talked about redefining the nature of the primitive. You know, it's amazing how out of the arrogance of Homo sapiens, at least white versions of Homo sapiens, we've decided that everything that's gone before us is somehow inferior or less, and we can describe it as primitive, when in reality that's the source of our greatest wisdom, you know. I'm also reflecting on where we began on Monday with David Suzuki, and I know that after decades and decades of doing everything that he knows and knew how to do to deal with logging and in defense of First Nations peoples and whatnot, how he does indeed pass through times where he becomes discouraged at where we have arrived. And but we also, I think, have to acknowledge that he is right in many ways, that we are in the 59th minute, and that there is a tremendous sense of urgency that it's important that we acknowledge and recognize. Jim talks about it as code red in terms of all of that. And that while the long view, which is the view that Vandana shared with us this morning, is absolutely essential that we have, I think we also have to remember that she did not address the situation with Monsanto in India by sitting back. She was up on the balls of her feet, engaged, recognizing that each human being has an incredible power, that if we exercise it, miracles show up, you know? And so that power of one that I whack away at all the time is something that I hope everyone all over the world remembers. That woman who you were privileged to witness and to hear this morning is a living demonstration of the power of one, and she reminds us of the small things. That's what's so incredible. She reminds us of Gandhi and the spinning wheel, and how he defeated the largest empire of his time by simply focusing on the small things that he and people all over India could do in weaving and in breaking the hold of the economic monopoly on India. So anyway, Jim, what do you have to say?
Well, first of all, I'm so appreciative of both of you for convening this. It's been an unusually diverse and thoughtful gathering of great spirits, I would say. You know, I'm thinking of Michael Meade and the deep profundity of his remarks yesterday, and his notion of the fact that we're in the age of the great forgetting, and the mythological motifs that he brought to bear. I found Michael just unusually poignant yesterday. And I think I was also very struck by Elvis, the gentleman from the Great Green Belt, who was talking about the youth in Africa who were turning to terrorism because they were feeling completely useless in the contemporary society, and that at least the terrorist organizations gave them a sense of purpose and meaning. And I just, found that just so piercing to realize that we've forgotten so much, that our young people are in a deepening despair. And I think the latest polls show that, upwards of 60% of all the young people around the world believe that we're doomed, that there's basically nothing that we can do. So as people in the older generation, I've experienced, this week as a real challenge for the kind of world that we're leaving to our young, and how we can empower our young in the midst of this carnage that's being not only taking place, but accelerating in the face of the climate science, in the face of rising ecological turbulence, with an event every 18 days now on average. It's causing over $1 billion in damage. And yet the Bill Gates of the world, the Monsantos of the world, don't stop. And how we organize ourselves in the face of that. And, I was thinking of Tuesday, of the presentations by Gary Snyder, I believe his name is, on the orangutan in Indonesia, and his valiant efforts to preserve that extraordinarily beautiful species of monkey, and Laurie's work with the cheetahs. And then, the story that I just happened to bring in and hear about the cheetahs, and the fact that there's examples of a forest manager who's gotten so intimate, I would say, with the cheetahs as a human being, that they sleep with him at night and come in and gather together. And you just think of that thought, that at the one hand, the cheetahs are wild, untamable carnivores, predators. We've seen all the documentaries of them, ripping an antelope limb from limb while still on the run, the fastest creatures in the world. And yet they snuggle in with a forest manager because he's managed to do exactly what Vandana was talking about, allowing the earth to lead and seeing his humanity within the larger ecology of relatedness with all sentient being. We have a little squirrel here at the house that was tamed by my oldest son. And when she gets hungry, she comes and she knocks on our door. And she'll come into the house. Because we, in our own small little way, are crossing the bounds of human and wild, and human and other, within the context that it's, as you said, Tom, I think it's a beautiful notion, is that beauty is the fabric of the universe. Those little squirrels, scampering about, are just as intelligent and willful and emotional and characterized by different personalities as we are, but in a completely different frequency, because they're squirrels. We're humans. And then there's whales and dolphins and all kinds of things out there. And I've often said that, if humans would spend as much time learning the language of nature, learning the language of other species, that we would probably do more to save ourselves than possibly anything else, because learning the language, interspecies communication in an intentional, communicable way is I think, the real future of humanity, not destroying nature, but in learning how to communicate with all those species. They'd give us a lot of great advice. And so anyway, those would be some thoughts that I would bring in, because I think they're very salient for our time today. I think Claire and Luke and Zach, our little family, have learned as much from, we call her Mrs. Red, Miss Red. She's got a red tail. We've probably learned as much from her as we do from the evening news. But it's much more interesting. And so that would be my comment.
Jim, your squirrel isn't online and it can't text and none of those essential things, that's wonderful. Tom, one of the things I'd like people around the country to learn more about is Endangered Global. I'd like them to know the work that you've initiated and are given birth to, and where it goes from here, and how maybe they can get involved and participate.
Yeah, thank you, George. And I'm going to start with a comment that Vandana shared with us this morning. She said, what is endangered is our cosmology, our theory of the universe. And thank goodness, it's our theory of the universe, our cosmology has a million species on the endangered species list. Our arrogance as a species, our ignorance as a species, has taken this extraordinary gift, planet Earth, and put it at a place of endangered for humanity. And thank goodness our cosmology, our theory of the universe, our thought about what the Earth is endangered. And that theory can't die soon enough. And she shared with us so much this morning, as did our panelists this week, but that's one thing that has me stirred, is just, what is it going to take for that cosmology, that theory, to go extinct? And how quickly can we make that happen? And I'm just so appreciative of you, Jim, in giving us the space this week to help accelerate the extinction of our theory of the universe, and to replace it with something that is healthy. So I'll start there, George, and it really speaks to the creation of Endangered.global. And it was a recognition on my part that for decades now, scientists and the scientific data and the scientific information has been there. The wisdom keepers, the wisdom traditions, the indigenous people have been telling us for centuries, our way of being on the earth is destructive. So the data has been there, the information has been there, and yet humanity has continued to just to be on the planet in a way that's highly destructive. And so I was trying to understand what is it going to take to shift human consciousness? What is it going to take to shift our way of being on the planet? What is it going to take to wake people up? And it goes back to a comment I made earlier about beauty being the fabric of the universe. And one of the things we've all experienced in our life is when we're witness to beauty, when we're reminded of beauty, there's an opportunity for us to wake up, to shift our consciousness, to shift our way of being. And artists, whether they're musical artists, fine artists, or other forms of art forms, reach our heart. They have a way of shaking us up, waking us up, shifting our consciousness. And most artists are out there on the leading edge. They're connected to wisdom and information and knowledge and beauty in a way, and can express it in a way that reaches our heart rather than our head. And when we're getting data and information from scientific reports, from news, from wherever our sources happen to be, we're processing it in our head and it doesn't make its way down to our heart. And if we can reach people through their hearts, it has a transformational quality. It has a way of waking people up. So that was the inspiration for me in creating Endangered.global. It really was about how do we reach people through our hearts. And so using music, using video, using film, using fine art as a mechanism, as a means of reaching people's hearts with the hope of accelerating the extinction of our cosmology, our theory of the universe, our belief system that man was in charge of nature, and that we're stewards and we have a responsibility. So that's part of the inspiration, that's part of the theory, that's part of the philosophy, that's part of why I get up every day and do what I can to contribute to the shift in human consciousness that's necessary if we can, if we're going to help move these million species off the endangered species list, if we're going to have a future for humanity.
And for those of you who are watching and listening, there's a lot coming, there are some plans for an international spectacular fundraising event that can raise millions and millions of dollars for NGOs and organizations that are involved in saving the species and doing the work of biodiversity and whatnot. And that's just the beginning. Art for sale, music to listen to, opportunity for us to get together and to connect with one another and to remember how important the role is that we play. And so if you're interested, Tom, give the website so people can reach out, would you?
Yeah, Endangered.global is the website where we have some of the initial content. It's still very much like most things in life, a work in progress. We've been at it for about 2 years. There's a lot more planning, a lot more to be rolled out in the coming year. And through the support of Empower New Mexico, we have an ability for people to donate funds to help support the work. In addition to folks who want to volunteer and be in support, I can be reached at tom@endangered.global, and happy to receive any kind of ideas, support, help that will help us accelerate this work. And it's very much about creating a healthy ecosystem that supports the artists, that supports the NGOs doing the phenomenal work like the Cheetah Conservation Fund and Dr. Marker and Trees for the Future and so many other organizations that are on the ground shifting the human consciousness with the communities they're working in, providing a bridge between this false dichotomy of the economy or the environment, creating women's empowerment opportunities, food security, dealing with hunger, restoring habitat. There's so many amazing organizations on the planet doing really good work. And the goal of Endangered is to shift human consciousness to help people realize this is the most critical decade in human history, and we still have time, but it's precious. And how do we support the people doing good work?
Thanks, Tom. And of course, let's not forget those of you out there, this gentleman with the curly gray hair and the smile on his face that's hosting us today and joining us, that Humanity Rising is also one of those platforms that needs support, and it needs great audiences. And so tell your friends about it so people will come back. Endangered will be back, I think, sometime in April. We'll let you know about that. And I just want to remind you that there is no power greater than the power of one. You have the capacity to make a huge difference by doing hundreds of smaller things every single day, so that if you're feeling like you can't influence this turmoil and challenge that's happening out there, know that you do and you can. And you just have to ask yourself, how can I love more? How can I be better at being human? How can I be better at communicating with those that I love and supporting them? And if we all do that, remember beauty, remember love, remember squirrels, and we can't miss. And I'm just going to close with what we opened with what I opened with on Monday. And then Jim can take us home, which is this poem by Thich Nhat Hanh, who passed away not that long ago. I had the pleasure of spending, Sadina and I, some time with Thich Nhat Hanh, and to be in his presence for a week or two and to feel the depth of his love. Extraordinary. Anyway, kiss the earth, walk and touch peace every moment, walk and touch happiness every moment. Each step brings a fresh breeze. Each step makes a flower bloom. Kiss the earth with your feet. Bring the earth your love and happiness. The earth will be safe, and we will feel safe in ourselves. Jim?
Thank you, George. Beautiful to bring in the spirit of Thich Nhat Hanh and just remind ourselves that in the end, it's about kissing the earth again, as if it's for the first time. So thank you for that. And Tom, thank you for bringing in, as we've closed out today, this beautiful image of beauty being the fabric of the universe. And I want to close with that and make a comment drawing from my great teacher, Socrates, who I've loved since I was a little boy, and Plato's great dialogue, the Symposium, that is a contemplation on the relationship between love and beauty. And he says, learning from the great Diotima, Socrates was a mentor to many, but his mentor was a sage woman called Diotima. And she said that love is that intelligence, a mediating intelligence that binds everything that is and shapes it into the beautiful. And that as we learn to love, as we deepen our capacity to embrace all things, she says it's as if we climb up a ladder, and at the top of the ladder, we realize that where we've arrived is at the edge of the vast ocean of beauty. And so, as we think and we hold that there are 1 million species endangered right now, of which we are one, as we hold the image of the Milky Way sent from southern Chile yesterday, as we hold all the speakers of this week, culminating with Vandana this morning, with an analysis of philanthrocapitalism within the context of a passionate embrace of the earth. Let us just affirm that the greatest thing I think we can all do is not so much what we do, because we all know what to do, but how we do what we do. And if we can get the how of love and beauty and deep compassion radiating out with every act and every thought and every word, we will probably accomplish more than all the armies that have ever marched in the history before our time, because we will be manifesting the greatest images and archetypal formations and impulses that actually hold the entire universe together as one. And as I said earlier, it was great philosopher Plotinus that said, in the end, the entire universe breathes as one. And that's the manifestation of love and beauty. And it's important to honor this impulse, everyone, because in a few days it's Valentine's. And that's the one day of the year where we just celebrate love. And we're going to do that, by the way, on Monday with a celebration of the great goddess Venus, Aphrodite, the archetype of the goddess of love and beauty, sexuality, and feminine vibrancy. So that'll be on Monday, which will be Valentine's Day. So I want to call that to everyone's attention, as well as something that I put in the chat. We have a Chartres community call on Sunday at 10 a.m. If you want to look at that link. And what we're going to be doing in Chartres this August. We're making pilgrimage to Chartres, one of the most sacred spots in all the world dedicated to the feminine, oozing with the telluric energy of the feminine. And it's going to be under the aegis of the goddess Venus. So love is in the air. And after 2 years of the pandemic, how we regenerate from the inside out our capacity to embrace one another again in the spirit of love, I think is the great calling of our time. And Tom and George, you have brought that energy in this week. And so I want to thank you for the exquisite mastery with which you've orchestrated these conversations, because you've embodied all the values that we all need to embrace as we move forward. So that brings us to an end of our session today, everyone, and to the completion of our 5-day program on endangered. So we will now close and welcome you to the after chat, which is an opportunity for all of you to speak more informally. Tom and George, you're welcome. And George, I'd like you to close us out. Just read once again the poem of Thich Nhat Hanh. He died only a few weeks ago, everyone. So he's still in his passing into the next realm. And let us hold Thich Nhat Hanh. Let us hold all the activists in the world working so valiantly for a better future as we listen to this poem that closes our session on endangered.
Kiss the earth, walk and touch peace every moment. Walk and touch happiness every moment. Each step brings a fresh breeze. Each step makes a flower bloom. Kiss the earth with your feet. Bring the earth your love and happiness. The earth will be safe, and we will feel safe in ourselves. Blessings, huh? Bye.
Blessings, everyone. See you Monday. Bye for now.
Thank you all.